Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now. Welcome to the Stoa. Peter Lindbergh, the steward of the Stoa. The Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most on the edge of this moment. And today we have Pat Ryan in the Dark Stoa, the most dangerous man on the internet, who's waving quite friendly right now. And so this is season 2 of Dismantling Humanism. I think that's the title of it. So you know the drill. If you've been here before, if you haven't, Pat's going to talk. If you have a question, put it in the chat box. I will call on you, and then you unmute yourself. If you want me to read your question on your behalf, just let me know, and I'll read it on your behalf. That being said, I will hand it over to you, Pat. And you need to have your screen. Hold on. Should work now.
Excellent. Hello, folks. Welcome back for round 2 of season 2, which is Devouring Humanism, which is a play on words when you think about it. Typically, I tend to give a talk about what it is you're going to face. So I'll do that. This one is called Absurd Logic. The previous video, I approached the Blue Church from a Hegelian Marxist dialectic, the ability to dismantle using critical theory against the structure, all of the parts in which it was made up of, and how to inverse every advantage it had, and how to destroy, how to inverse every advantage it had, and how to take everything that it penalized you for and turn that into a benefit. Now, I'm not going to use Marxist dialectic in every aspect of the Blue Church when I criticize it, because I loathe it so much, I'm going to throw multiple critical theories at it. So this one is going to be dedicated to alchemy, which is going to be the inverse of logic, and using alchemical review as a way to make systematic abuse go away. And this particular one's going to be, the last one focused on the identity heuristics that the Blue Church tends to favor, and how to tear those apart, how to break them down, how to invert them. This one, we're going to be focusing on the types of logic that the Blue Church tends to promote, and the types of logic that it inversely then denies and pretends doesn't exist. So without further ado, let us start. Okay. So, absurd logic. I think the date's right. It's wrong. Whatever. Okay, so season 1 is, we're still exploring this meme. This was season 1, Gnostic Warfare, for those who are new. Season 2 is Devouring Humanism, as I said, and episode 2 is going to focus on these parts of the meme. So it's going to focus on the saying terrorism is like car accidents, ergo you have to wear a seatbelt at all times because you never know when the terrorism happens. Liberty versus safety, which is a trap that people in the Blue Church constantly find themselves in and are unable to resolve, and that's on purpose. Scientism, which is the idea of being science advocates over being scientists. It's funny how the two tend to blend together. Orthogonality, which means trying to represent multiple features of a system without them technically overlapping, but there's a lot more to that, and this is actually a critical part of the Blue Church, and we're gonna examine why that's the case. Functional AI, meaning AI that doesn't do analysis. It's the type of AI that just comes up with a conclusion and then acts on it, and it's effectively not liable for its actions, as we see in things like, social media and Twitter and Google. Pattern recognition taboo, meaning you see a pattern, prepare to get slapped for it if it's outside of the church's domain. Utilitarianism, which, boy, we're going to go all into. Centralizing the imbecilization of subsystems, which means if you take a complex machine and you break it down into subsystems, you make those subsystems intentionally simple to control even if they are dispersed with one another. You can add this like centralization layer on top of these subsystems without actually having to get within the machine. And this is a core part of how the Blue Church infiltrates and takes over everything it touches. So we'll be exploring all of this hilariousness. Let's start with orthogonality, which is the first and final oppressor of mankind. That's a weird thing to say, but I promise I'll get to it. We'll start with the L, which is an ancient name for the cubit. The cubit was a very old way of measuring wealth. So if you had stacks of cloth or stacks of gold or whichever, you would use cubits to determine how much your trade was going to be, especially on the Silk Road in antiquity. Now, the thing about trying to measure how much gold is worth, how much silk is worth, how much cotton, is that you don't necessarily have an international standard for metrics at this time in the Bronze Age. The Chinese have one metric, the Middle East has another, Europe has another. How do you bring it all together? It's not easy to say, you know, my cubit's more cubit than your cubit, and that's just an endless argument. So what they did is they started looking at their own bodies. And they said, well, you know what? You know, the spot between my elbow and my finger, that's pretty much the same everywhere we go in the world. So we'll just use that. And this became the standard in which you measured your trade in. You would measure, you know, how many lengths between my elbow and my finger were we actually trading here. And this was as close as you could get at a universal metric system to conduct trade in a fair manner across systems which had totally incompatible metric systems between one another. And plus it was intuitive and it was hard to skimp on. You know, you couldn't just like grow your arm. It wasn't actually a thing you could do. So this worked for a long time. And of course, the cubit, which is you'll see actually in the Bible as well being mentioned there. And something interesting about this is that in addition to this being the source of accounting, this counting naturally leads to mathematics. In fact, that bone is called the radius. And, you know, these two things, we start to see that, oh, okay, there's a variableness between the humerus and the radius. Well, it looks like that. Well, oh my God, we figured out some basic geometry using our arm. And we're incentivized to do so because we're already using this part of our arm for trade. So now we start to see that there's a relationship between these lines because we're just doing all of our trade here all the time anyway. And there's a reason that bone, the radius, is the radius here in mathematics as well. This is the origin of the etymology. You're watching the origin of mathematics being born. See, the radius is right there. Now, where do we get the orthogonality from here? Because this is pretty variable stuff. This is very, you know, the radius could be anywhere in the circle, but just like the arm could be anywhere within reason. It's not like I can bend it this way and break myself. But for the most part, the idea that it was adjustable was a concept. So where do we get to orthogonality? Meaning, where do we get to intersecting lines or right angles? Well, again, put ourselves in psychohistory. Getting a straight line in antiquity is almost impossible. There's actually no way a human being can create a straight line in a way that's reduplicable because there's going to be tiny variations, there's going to be mistakes. If I try to make this line on a horizontal surface and if I try to make it on any one of these points, I'm going to be wrong. And then when you're trying to measure stuff based on that, if your measurements are off, then everything you do from there is off too. So how do you actually get a straight line given the severe limitations you have during the Bronze Age? We have what's called the plumb line. This is an old ancient technique that's still used today to figure out the straightness of whatever it is you're trying to do in terms of architecture in particular. So how do we know this is a straight line? Well, it's because of gravity. If we tie a heavy weight to this rope, we get a straight line, the only straight line we can actually form in nature, in antiquity. So we can actually we took this Platonic ideal of mathematics and we can actually create it in the real world. We have this mathematic ideal represented using this technique known as the plumb line. Now from this plumb line, I can then figure out, okay, how level am I? Am I being level? We see this right now in like, well, not leveling is a different story, but this plumb line is a way to determine, okay, is anything off here? If this was tilted this way, then I wouldn't have the parallel that I'm looking for. So my building will collapse if these aren't parallel. So I can very tightly, carefully measure each brick as I go along the line and make sure that I'm para-aligned with this reproducible constant that I can throw everywhere I need to throw it down. So this is incredibly useful and still used to this day in construction. In fact, this was so useful that very old civilizations and modern ones used it as well. You'll see this. That's the plumb line as well. This is the point of reference in which you can do additional mathematics. You can actually figure out, okay, how far is the star from where I'm at? The Potemics could figure this out just from the plumb line alone. And then you'll see in the medieval periods trying to measure how tall a building is from the plumb line alone. So this is where we actually cross the ideals of mathematics and bring them into reality, is from this part alone. And this is an orthogonal line by default. This is why this line exists. We're trying to create orthogonality between the ground and gravity itself. So you have all of civilization from one line, which is crazy. It's crazy to think about that, but that's absolutely the case. It's one line. And then furthermore, about why the arm is used, humans are pretty good at watching each other and observing each other. And when they're trying to figure out this problem of measuring how to conduct trade and make sure it's fair, they looked at all parts of their body. They didn't just pick the radius because they was bored one day and they said, hey, that's a good part of the body to use. It turns out when you measure the average distance differences between bodies and body lengths at the same age, the radius is the least variation of the average. So if you use the tibia or the fibula or the humerus, you'd have a greater variation of the average. And so you'd have more unfair trade. The radius was actually the most stable out of all the bones, or I should say the least variation of average between human beings and different cultures and everything else. So you have this intuitive and reliable heuristic to standardize value in a world full of relative value assessment. So it's like a hack. It's like a great unifier of trade, which is great. And again, all these different empires with their own different interpretations of mathematics and trade, using your arm is, not bad. So when the world ends and you got to restart trade, you got your arm. You're ready to go. You can do it. I believe in you. So now, because we can measure stuff and we can bring the ideals of mathematics into the real world and get real world results, let's just go all the way with it. Let's, we can build buildings. Let's try to measure happiness now. Let's just, think big. That's where Jeremy Bentham comes in. Now, this guy, he was a utilitarianism. He was a utility guy. I'm gonna call him utility men because I don't like him. So, social reformer. There's a pile of buzzwords coming up, right? So, fundamental axiom. This is a person who thought trying to find that one plumb line for all of society, that one line that you can then extrapolate all other possibilities from. He was a plumb line seeker for sure. It's the greatest happiness of the greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong. Oh boy. We may be starting hitting problems for some people in the audience, and other people be like, I don't see a problem with this. Well, hang tight. I'm going to do my best to make it funny, to explain why this could probably spiral out of control if you're not careful. So, political radical, which I always love that word, radical. I call kittens radical, and I like not calling humans radical because it pisses them off. Political radical who ideals influence the development of welfareism. That sounds familiar. Individual economic freedoms, sure. Separation of church and state, freedom of expression, equal rights for women, right to divorce. This guy is freaking progressive. He's ready to go. Decriminalizing homosexual acts, ahead of his time. Look at him go. Abolition of slavery, capital punishment, physical punishment, including that of children. This guy he doesn't want humans. He wants humans to be happy, right? But these are all of the things he can do from the legal standpoint to get people happy. That's all he cared about. He's just like one of those people pleasers, right? And he just turned it into a political thing. Animal rights, natural rights. He was very skeptical of the idea of a natural law and natural rights, God-given. Nonsense upon stilts, he called it, exact wording. So this guy is just like a literal blue church saint. You should just, if you like the blue church, you should tattoo this guy to your face. It's pretty solid. Like, this is it. You'll never beat this guy, right? Except the problem where he invented the panopticon. so oops, right? So in addition to making sure that people reach this happiness, his idea was to make the perfect prison. And that's a juxtaposition if you really kind of think about that. So making sure that in order for prisoners to reform them to make them happier or to fit them in a crowd of people which are happy and the prisoner might not be, you use the panopticon technique, which is you have this observation deck in the center, which should be blacked out. You shouldn't be able to see whether someone's in it or not. And then all the prisoners are looking at it because their cells are facing inward. And because they don't know if a guard is in the cell or not, the guard is now, the prisoner is now forced to modify their own behavior. So I don't have to actually put a gun or a prod or, make fun of them. They just assume the guard's watching them, even if there is none. And all of you have you're currently living in this world today. If you've ever walked into a convenience store and you see a security camera, but it's like this really shaded glass, you don't know if the camera's looking at you or not. Well, congratulations, this guy invented that. So he invented this big brother, the eye is watching you even if the eye is not there, the all-seeing eye. Yeah, it's this guy, your blue church saint who was all about making happiness. Yeah, the only way you could do it is by putting you in prison. Look at that. So we're already jumping the shark, right? We didn't have to go very far to realize that maybe this concept has some problems. And then we have John Stuart Mill, who is an intellectual titan, for sure. The guy wrote extensively, and I'm going to cherry pick, and I'm going to admit my bias here. I'm cherry picking here. Feel free to attack me appropriately. This guy was probably the closest to an actual political philosopher Britain has ever independently developed. Very, very influential stuff. But he was one of those utility guys, saying that pleasure itself, reality utility is defined as pleasure itself and the absence of pain. Straight up, right? No bones about it. Actions are right in proportion that they tend to promote happiness, and tend is a good defensive word to be used there. That's clever, that's smart. Wrong is they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. By happiness, it is intended pleasure and the absence of pain, and by unhappiness, pain and the privation of pleasure. Meaning, happiness is when you can get pleasure and there is no pain, and unhappiness is when there is pain and you do not get pleasure. Actions are good, lead to a higher general level of happiness, and bad would need to decrease that level. So this may sound novel and interesting and free license to say fuck you, dad, forever, but this isn't new. This is old stuff. It's called hedonism. Greeks invented this ages ago. This is, he just stole it. That's all he did. He gave it a fancy name at a time when people were developing access to world wealth and humongous amounts of capital, and they couldn't be confined under a king. So this type of ideology really appeals to that type of people who say, well, colonies are overthrowing their masters all the time, and there's wars, and we don't need monarchs or churches. We have our own money. We're good, thanks. This is the ideology of those people. That's all. That's all it was. And again, hedonism, which, ethical hedonists would defend that either increasing pleasure and reducing suffering of all beings capable of experiencing them. And that's basically what we should be doing. He was a person who invented it, was a student of Socrates. He held the idea that pleasure is the highest good. And this is all, John Stuart Mill, just for this segment of his work, he has a whole body of work beyond this segment. But for this segment, it's just hedonism. All he's doing is promoting hedonism. That's it. And again, another blue church saint of the highest order. And this is true in Britain and in America. So here's what there's your hedonism, folks. Ideal utility, just heroin up. Don't need to do anything else. We got this solved. Thank you, John Stuart Mill. So I'm going to focus, my criticism has been flippant so far. So I'm going to focus on a very specific part of it. I'm going to focus on that word right there. Now you might say, Pat, come on, you're just splitting hairs. How are you going to focus on a word to take down a comprehensive philosopher who really, really got it right? Like, how can you even do that? Well, here's how I can do that. Because level implies measuring happiness, right? The idea that we can put a number, I have 7 happies, and tomorrow I'll have 9 happies, right? So we're putting this level on it. And why is this a problem? Well, again, the criticism's fair. Yes, me fixating on a single word might be out of order, but bear with me. I'm not the first to do this. let's look at philosophic calculus. That was a thing. So like there he is, Jeremy Bentham once again, coming up with an attempt to force fuck mathematics to comport to this idea of measuring happiness. They believed in the moral rightness and wrongness of an action to be a function of the amount of pleasure or pain that it is, a function, right? A mathematical function, a transformation of inputs to outputs. Right? Utility calculus, hedonistic calculus, this type of thing. And here's all the things, you know, the duration and certainty and, you know, all the arbitrary factors that he put into this calculatory method. So basically, let's force the association of pleasure and pain as orthogonal, and I'll give you a demonstration of that, because it's not enough to simply say that that pain is over here and pleasure is over here. That's not enough. It's actually orthogonal, and I'll get into that. And then exploit that mathematical authority because it's math. Of course, math is, if you bind anything in math, and it's always true forever and ever, right? And we're going to turn pleasure seeking into a full-blown political system. And that's where it ends. So look at that. Look, he's back here again. Wow, kind of strange. There's your peak utility once again. If heroin isn't enough, call Epstein. He'll help you out. Okay, so here's that orthogonality I was talking about. So this is much joy, very pleased. Small join should be joy. Tiny pleased, small pain, tiny ouch, much pain, very ouch, right? So real bad, a lot of pain, not a lot of pain, really a lot of pleasure, not a lot of pleasure, right? So here's your orthogonality, because again, you can't just simply say pain is the absence of pleasure. It's very possible to experience both at the same time if you're into that stuff. And it's also very positive. It's also, you know, if you have not a lot of pleasure and not a lot of pain, you're probably asleep. You know, that's a reality too. So things happen, right? So it's orthogonal. And this right here is the line. This is the plumb line of the blue church, right? So this is the plumb line that once I can establish it, I can build the entirety of the right side of history narrative, because I'm maximizing pleasure and I am reducing pain. And that is my moral authority. And from that plumb line, I can extract the entirety of everything afterwards. So again, it's called a blue church, and there's a reason for that. From a line, you can create shapes. From shapes, you can make symbols, and from symbols, you can make churches. So from this line, I will be able to show you how to build a blue church of your own. Oh, and by the way, and if you're outside of that line, you're a Nazi, which I can't say anymore because, you know, everyone's listening. So if you don't like pain or pleasure, you're a Stoic Nazi. If you like a lot of pain and no joy, you're a Protestant, and satanic Nazis are apparently a thing now. So, you know, just keep the hits coming. But you're supposed to stay here, right? This is where you're going to be, and there's a whole medley of reasons why you're forced here, even against your will. Just like that Bentham prison, where we're going to measure that happiness, and God damn it, we're going to keep you here. So let's start with how a civilization kind of appears at a high level heuristic. Start with linguistics, just people talking. Congratulations, we're talking, awesome. We're agreeing that we're not being violent, we're talking, so that's a start. We can probably build from there further. So we figure out political things, which is just a block button nowadays. But we figure out political stuff, cultural studies, education. We start to grow this linguistic capacity into these other ways of trying to figure out how to manage ourselves as our populations grow and as our experiences with nature grows. Education and linguistics naturally lead to philosophy. Philosophy leads to mathematics, and the political process and cultural studies lead to geography, because this is how you allocate your collective resources to claim land and have a base and a presence in these type of things. Meanwhile, mathematics is over here just fucking off from philosophy, which then leads to natural sciences. Geography then leads to economics. And these lines flow back into each other, by the way. I should have pointed that out. So it's not like linguistics leads to political process. Political process can also influence linguistics. It's all back and forth. Everything can influence everything here in a tension relationship. So economics is a byproduct of geography, as multiple actors upon the geographic sphere are now forced to use their arms to trade with one another. Natural sciences comes from mathematics. Finance is a result of economics. This poor guy, he just can't print fast enough. Got to measure all that money and the debt and all that stuff. That leads to the trades. People were building stuff before all of this complicated thing. Yeah, that's true. But in terms of like properly configuring and deploying labor in a way that was profitable, you needed all this stuff in place first. So you get to the trades and as like this vehicle, this function of civilization that comes roughly after finance, surprisingly, because the people were trading regardless, but this actually organized them as a fist. And then you have material sciences. As the trades interact with the earth and find more stuff about nature, they have questions and they want better things about the earth. Like I find some dirt and what if I apply fire to it? Oh, well, I get hardened clay and I can do stuff. So these two things work together to actually generate material sciences. And once we get here, once we cross this rubric or Rubicon, we stumble upon this mess. We get here. And once we figure this one out, this is where the blue church line kind of comes from, trying to figure out, okay, there's humans in this system. How do I optimize for each one? How do I make them better? How do I increase pleasure and reduce pain? Well, it infects linguistics first. We're going to increase the pleasure of linguistics and reduce the pain of linguistics. We're going to say there's certain words you're allowed to say and certain words you're not allowed to say. And then we're going to constantly change up the definition of things too, so you never really know what's going on. And once we're successfully able to put a blue plumb line there, well, then we can spread out. Then we can do the same thing to the political process. How do we maximize the pleasure of the political process and minimize the pain? Well, we're going to make sure you only vote for things that are good for you. Who cares who else gets affected? It's your pain and your pleasure that matters. So we're going to make that the normal. Now, for cultural studies, we want to increase the pleasure and reduce the pain. How do we do that? Well, there's certain cultures that we want to focus on, and there's certain cultures we're not going to focus on because it's painful. We're not going to focus on the horrible truth of slavery. We're going to focus on some abstract representation of it, some scapegoat version of it, but we're not going to focus on the real thing, because if we did that, we'd be there all day. So we're going to maximize the pleasure and not talk about that shit. Then we're going to do the same thing to psychology and education and philosophy. And before you know it, it doesn't get here yet. You'd think it would go here, but we saved this one for last because you got to get the whole of civilization before you can actually change the geography of it. So now we got to go for mathematics. We've already targeted philosophy. We've already got the utility guys in control of philosophy here. Great, now we're going to do math. Now we're coming into the realm of absurd logic, where we're selecting for math that makes us more pleasurable, and math that drives pain, throw it out the window. So it's not enough to say, well, I'm logical, so I win. That's not sufficient. The fact is there are plenty of logical conclusions in mathematics that are not the highlight or focus of any type of serious research. Only the ones that have been selected are those that have followed this blue line, this plumb line, mathematics that increase the concept of pleasure and decrease pain. I think the most obvious one that comes to mind, I would say, let's take relativity, for example. Relativity has all kinds of fun terminology and concepts associated with it that are directly built somehow on all of these other on these other blue church plumb lines. The idea that, oh, there is no fixed points. There is no fixed morality. There is no fixed universe. There's only everything in relation to each other. Well, you can come to that conclusion as long as you can pre-subvert all of these other affects of civilization. Because then when this guy makes his claim and says, oh, well, we could take relativity and say, yeah, here's some actual math behind it that works, but then we're going to create a scientism culture about relativity. And we're going to use that as a narrative to reinforce that everything's relative, man. Lay back and chill. What are you doing? So then we push that to the natural sciences. Then we push it to material. Then we push it to the trades. Before you know it, you have finance with Goldman Sachs out there running around caring about what, the LGBT flag all of a sudden? Like, where were they 30 years ago, right? There's economics. And then finally, you get the geography. So this is how a blue church infiltrates an entire civilization, by simply selecting for what's pleasurable and preventing what's painful. It's all it has to do. Let's see, it's not this complicated conspiracy. It's not like muhaha at the top of the throne room and smoky cigar rooms. It's a simple selection criteria. You infiltrate a group and you simply say, does this cause pleasure? No, get out. Yes, you win. All you have to do is define what pleasure is, of course, but then you got to stick to your guns. And it's easy to do because, well, everybody wants pleasure. It's like arguing for the lowest IQ, least age person in the entirety of civilization and using that as your foundation, which is why this shit works all the time. So this is how Blue Church just infiltrates everything. They use pleasure. That's it. Device. That's it. No magic trick, no nothing. That's it. So now, once they start infiltrating science with this technique, there's a fun side effect where they can actually conflate science to moral authority. So you could say, well, mathematics isn't biased and science isn't biased. We have a whole team of people who aren't princes and kings and people who aren't in the political process. They're just scientists. They're observing nature. And it's important to make sure that we bind our behavior to what we know about nature and we synchronize them at all times, because that's how we can get a moral authority that isn't corruptible. Because I can't corrupt an atom. I mean, what's the point of Bitcoin? I can't corrupt a miner. I can't go in there and say, hey, miner, you're gonna Bitcoin process extra for like libertarians and instead of monarchists, right? You can't really do that. So because of that corruption factor that exists in every part of the political process, you do want to select this authority that's outside of it. And so science and mathematics is usually the first candidate. However, if you put that blue line in science, you get the veneer of moral authority without having to acknowledge that you actually have subverted it. And here's what that looks like. So a question pops up and you say, why do we starve to death? Okay, so some scientists answer and it's just a wall of crap that I'm not reading that shit. Like I'm starving, I'm not reading that. But here's some good propaganda. Now this face, I just saw this. I'm like, that's not natural. I know that's photoshopped. Like that is an engineered face to make you look at it and go, what? Like, look at there's like dodge around the eyes. I don't think that those eyes even belong to that like subset of people. Those lips are like 20 years older than they should. This is like an engineered face designed for people to go, oh, right? This is like Psycho Weapon, the face, right? So why do we starve to death? Oh, this person's sad and they have an excuse. Oh, it's because the people who made you starve, they wanted to kill ideas and beauty, equality, peace, and oh man. So now you have this moral champion running around. And then you have this block of text, which actually has the answer in here somewhere in this mess. Is probably a pretty damn good argument of why you actually starved. Could have been a crop storm or global warming or whatever. It's probably a good answer in here. But this is what actually works. Now, why does this work? Well, here's the two people. Here's our scientists who double as moral authorities, who don't know it, of course. They pretend to not know it. And here's why they're all liars. Because they made this piece. They churned this motherfucker out. And they're right. Yeah. But this is the audience. Man, they hate words. Like, have you seen these people? They hate words. Words hurt them. It physically causes pain to them to see words. But they'll listen to this sad girl. Oh, so sad. So now the whims of the people, they don't care about this. They care about this. So how do I increase my public funding? Well, I'll care about that. Ta-da! So now you had these supposedly impartial scientists and their moral authority. Well, now they're just populists. Populist opportunists. That's it. So they're no longer outside of the political process. They are part of the political process. They are the political process, effectively. This, of course, leads to pattern recognition problems. So there's only certain people who are allowed to see patterns, and everyone else is not authorized to see the pattern. You're not allowed to see the pattern. Only scientists are allowed to see the pattern. The rest of you are conspiracy theorists. Here's what that looks like. Right side of history has some opinions. It says for maximum happiness, because that's what we're doing, we're increasing maximum happiness, we've forced racial integration. Now, for most people, that's probably like, all right, that's a good thing. Yeah, that is a good thing. I mean, aside from the fact that it totally destroyed black communities and their ability to be economically, robust. Aside from that, then yeah, it was great. It gave cheap labor to Ford, gave cheap labor for the entire North. Yeah, it made a lot of money off that. It's fantastic, right? So it's super good. Then you say for maximum happiness, you got to put that first. You got to say maximum happiness. We've reclassified Hispanics as white. Wait, what? What? I mean, the Spanish are technically European, so sure, maybe. All right, I'll let that slide too. Fuck it, that's fine. All right, no big deal. Right? No big deal. For maximum happiness, we arrest 25% of black males, and then we'll call you racist. Whoa, hold on. Wait a second. I didn't arrest them. What are you talking about here? I didn't do that. You guys did that. Well, how am I involved in this? So now there's contentions. You might start to see a pattern here. And it's like, I don't know. Am I allowed to like talk about this pattern? Well, no, because if you don't, you're one of these. You'll be driven here. So you can't talk about the pattern. And because you can't talk about the pattern, we just gonna keep going because we can. Let's keep going. So now, by the way, women, now you have to work 12 hours a day. Oh, and it's called freedom, by the way. So, woohoo, good job. So now you get to work like slaves all day. Awesome. Can't talk about it. Can't call that pattern. Just keep going. We no longer publish M2 or M3, so we don't even know our own money supply. Derivatives, post-credit. It was for maximum happiness. That's why we stopped posting the velocity numbers from the Federal Reserve. We had to maximize happiness, you see. Well, now we're maximizing happiness some more. We decided to start a war. It lasts for 17 years. Wait, hold on. How do we get to here from there? How do we get to this blurb from all this stuff? Well, it's simple. These blurbs didn't matter insofar as they tested your ability to speak up. And you didn't speak up. So now we can push ultra hard. Now we can push super hard because we've already set up the fact that if you recognize the pattern, we will slap you. And we'll just keep going. We already got the war going for 17 years. Let's push it. Let's go to the next step. To maximize happiness, we've decided that unaccountable, society-wide psychological research is the new economy. The whole thing. Everything that Facebook and Google does, that's the new economy. And we're doing it for maximum happiness. And the only reason you could even get to this part is because you allowed this part. That already crossed. We already figured out that anybody who sees the pattern here, 9/11 kooks all day long, every single one of these bubbles has their own special brand of conspiracy theorists that's just ready for you to insult and harass and go after. It's just hand delivered right to you, just waiting for you to use. We've already gotten to the level of absurdity here for rights. We're trying to maximize happiness. Fuck it. Let's go all the way. Let's see how bad we can really make it. 2 + 2 = 5 now. Now, for some of you, this might be the line. This might finally be it. It wasn't the large amount of wars and the body count and the wealth destruction and everything else. That wasn't it. Nope. Wasn't your bag of tea. This one might be the one, right? This one, you're finally going to stand up and say enough is enough, right? No, you're not. Because this entire army of people have already lined up and they're ready to slap you too. And they will. So the reality is that they're maximizing happiness so they can do whatever they want. And that's the reality. It has nothing to do with maximizing happiness because you've let these abuses slide for so long that they can do whatever they want. Now, what do you look like in this process? Maybe a loyal freedom fighter. You're going to fight the cause, man. You're not going to do that. Because why are we selecting for the right side of history, right? Why do we even care about maximizing happiness? Most of us live here, to be honest, barring some, physical ailment or serious problem. We try to live here. They tell us to live here. We mostly live here. Mostly live here. On this line, we live here, right? So if this represents all human potential, this picture right here, if this represents all human possibility, and all the future that you can have and all the things you intend to do and your dreams and your hopes and ambitions, if you take this person and you put them in this mess, you end up with this. You end up with a really well-trained dog with that treat right there and eyes of pure panic because it's waiting for the command to snap the treat and it's never going to get the command. All it's going to get is more abuse forever. Because we're maximizing happiness. And that's what we've done. And if you disagree with any of these steps along the way, any one of these points you come up with, you are up against this. Every single bubble along the way. Every single one. Now this guy, he's made peace with his fate. He knows he'll never be anything, and that's just the end of him. But these people are always at the ready, just waiting to slap you for not maximizing happiness. And then we get to our morality machines, the functional AI, which will be the morality police for the Blue Church. There already are, in fact. So here's our little morality machine we've gone over. Here's our little blue line, our blue plumb line. And here's our behavioral state machine. as we identify how to morph states over time for ideal outcomes on behalf of this morality machine. So perhaps this tree looks like we're deploying chatbots to simulate socialization. So if a person is deviating from the blue line, we can bring them back by giving them some human interaction, something where they can say, oh, well, I socialized today. It felt good. Maybe we can induce laughter epidemics with memes and content, sharing it all around. We can do that too. We'll bring you back to the blue line. We're maximizing happiness, right? Then we can activate deep dream conflict assets, and they can pump your adrenaline and dopamine. Deep Dream is it's a Google project designed to how do I put this? Activate people into frothing beasts is probably the best way to describe it. So whenever you see somebody acting hyper partisan on the internet, it's not that that person's actually at fault. They've been activated by the manipulations of these machines. So they've been actually induced into a state of political rage because they either need to put someone else closer to the blue line, or they are trying to burn them out so that they capitulate and go back to the blue line on their own. And then fuck it, we'll just steer them towards opioids. We'll just show them advertising of, oh God, it's Cass Sunstein. Look at this fucking clown. So anyway, this guy, he's a piece of work, and he's going to be in a lot of trouble soon. But he's part of the Nudge Boys. The Nudge Boys are a team of people who believe in this crap right here, where they can control the option tree and gradually nudge you towards that blue line so that we don't have to deploy police with sticks that look evil and mean, and deploy soldiers that look evil and mean. We can just nudge you along the way, and if we can't, you'll just die of drug overdose. Whatever, no big deal. So that's Cass Sunstein's big plan. There it is. And he was at NSA doing stuff about 10 years ago. But anyway, just hang tight. You're going to see more of him soon. So now I like to play a game called Connect the NPC to Pornhub, and all the steps that you have to do to make that happen, right? So once we set up that morality machine, and we set up that blue line reinforcement mechanism, what we're interested in, what we're trying to do is happiness by itself tends to imply choice. So like I choose out of all I'm at the grocery store, right? So I'm at this grocery store, and there's like bananas and apples, and what do I choose? What am I choosing, right? What maximizes my happiness given this medley of choices? So I pick one. It might not matter what I pick, but it does matter to me for my happiness. So the happiness and choice tend to be related, but you can still get happiness if it's done for reactive safety. So reactive safety means if you're in a situation where all of your choices are either burning barrels of fire or an apple, did you really choose the apple? No, you went with the safest choice out of all the mess that's available to you. So we can actually simulate choice. We can create the veneer of choice, but what you're actually doing is you're getting reactive safety because you're going to the safest choice through the maze. Now, when you do this actually allows for unlimited violence. And let me show you how. So here's our poor NPC's options. He can go to war. He can deal with a lynching, or oh look, a pretty girl. Someone has their mic on. Or you can pick the pretty girl. Did he pick the pretty girl? Did he really choose that? Or did he just not want to go to war? Did he really choose her, or did he just not want to lynch someone? Was there a choice? Now, what was the revelation of preferences here? So we've made our choice, and now we got a bum and having the shit kicked out of you, and oh, look, another Victoria model. Oh, well, who's going here? Oh, look at that. Did I choose her? I didn't choose her. I just didn't choose this guy. I'm not making choices here. Oh, look at this. Burning building and starving kid and some sex kitten. Okay, there, bang. Okay, oh, look, connected the NPC to Pornhub. We did it. Did he make these choices? He didn't make those choices. We just know what he didn't pick. What if you replace this with other stuff? He probably would have picked that too. But these were his choices. So what you're doing is, this is a simulation of happiness. This isn't real happiness. Not by a long shot. It's not that this guy is a pervert who needs to fucking, crank it every couple days or minutes or whatever. This is a guy who has no choice but to pick this. because the option trees laid before him from the morality machines and the blue line reinforcement has forced him down this road. And as a result, he's going down this road of false happiness, and everything else is just collapsing around him. And there's nothing he's going to do about it because he's obviously not going to pick the mess. So he's allowing for unlimited violence. And he's telling himself he's happy. So now that he's established his happy path through the mess and the noise, any threat to it is equivalent to a mortal threat, because he doesn't want to get dragged into that high conflict scenario. So he doesn't want to get involved with this because, well, you're always racist forever. There's no cure. There's nothing. You're just racist forever. That's it, right? So he doesn't want to partake in that. So he's not going to. The more debt you rack up, the more people they have to shoot. That's a losing game. I don't have to work to stay alive. That's your job. Like, oh man, that's really rubbing it in, right? It's like nothing you do matters. Everything you build will burn. Like, oh God, these are things. If he was forced to address any of these, it's just going to be like, oh man, he has no experience in dealing with this stuff either. There's no point of reference. Then there's, the suffering of this person's more important than yours. So now you're rationalizing why you should dehumanize yourself. And if you do speak up, well, there's always this guy waiting to pummel you into the ground for not speaking correctly at the right turn, blah, blah, blah. And so what we've done is by optimizing for happiness, by selecting the maximum amount of happiness, what we've done is we've created a blue church pay pig. That's what we've done. We've created this dog in a human. The snack is right there. All he has to do is bite it, but we won't let him. It's right there. He's a pay pig. Pay me, you pig, or this will happen to you. So this isn't happiness. He's not selecting for happiness. But the blue church can tell you that he is because we've optimized for it. And this is what it is. This is the Bentham prison. This is the Bentham panopticon prison established to create this self-monitoring prisoner. So now that we know how the prison works and we know the problems of selecting for the blue line above all other things and selecting for happiness, how do we undo it? How do we reverse all that? Now, yeah, we could approach this with a very structured philosophical view, and we could use Marxism, and we can do critical theory, and we can do right side of it. Yeah, we can do more blue chart shit. Sure, yeah, we could do that until we're blue in the face. But what I'm doing is pointing out absurd logic, and the only way to beat logic is to use something that is absolutely not logical at all. And I'm going to use alchemy, because there's no logic in alchemy. Because if the people who are selecting for certain types of logic, this absurd logic system that I've pointed out, they have no skill, no understanding of this stuff. They have no talent in it whatsoever, and they can't actually use it and fight against it. So what I'm going to show you is how to use alchemical comprehension, a very small snippet of it, to reverse the domestication of human beings. Now, some people would call this radicalizing terrorists. I call it temporarily suspending domestication. I intend for people to go back to being domesticated afterwards. But this is how you do it from an alchemical position. A wolf pack plus copper. I'm pretty sure I just lost you. A wolf pack plus copper equals our pay pig. The inverse is also true. If I remove the copper, I get the wolf pack back. Now, what the fuck does that mean? Right? Right now, I've already jumped the ship of logic, but I told you I would. I said I'm not going to use logic. I'm going to use like semblances of it, but I'm not going to use like this like structured thing. First, you're probably stuck here, right? You don't know what copper. What do I mean copper? Like I hit you with a penny? Like I hit a wolf with a penny and no, that's not what I'm saying. You got to understand the alchemy of copper. So this is a modern alchemical symbol for copper, but this is not the original symbol. The original symbol for copper, ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please, is this. You've seen this symbol before. You've seen this symbol your entire fucking life. This is the symbol of the feminine. You're wrong. It's not the feminine. It's actually copper. It was never feminine. Copper as the feminine. Copper cables laid all over the world, everywhere, connecting you and me right now. Copper in the circuit boards the computers that are running all the processing for all the image and the voice that you're hearing from me right now. See, copper was this binding between Venus and copper was intrinsic, but Venus was never a Roman god. She was a Carthaginian god. In fact, to an alchemist, the internet is the ley lines of Venus. The whole internet. The entire goddamn internet is the ley line of Venus. So when I say remove the copper, and you'll turn those pay pigs back into wolves, this is what I'm talking about. You remove the ley lines of Venus. So, how does that look? So we go back to our blue line formula, our blue line mechanism, and we realize that instead of selecting for any one of these endlessly and mindlessly to create happiness, any one of these directions is actually straight up dehumanization. Only the feminine energy would pick this because to them, and to that energy in particular, I should say, not the females, but to that energy, maximizing happiness is what you want to do. That's exactly what you want to do. Maybe a mother watching over children, a woman trying to piece together a community that's been destroyed by war, trying to keep the calm between different people. That's typically what the Blue Church found itself in. But in reality, Bentham told us that he was going to make a panopticon. He fucking told us he was going to do that. It was right there. All of this is dehumanization. You go further into any one of these, it's just straight up dehumanization. That's where you end up. Let's just start with being alive. Let's not talk about optimizing or trying to create a better anything. Let's just start with alive, right? Where there's pain and there's pleasure, and that's life. Let's just start there, right? And then if you find that you're drifting towards here, you're having sinking issues. You're trying to bring it back. You're not trying to eliminate pain. You're not trying to maximize pleasure. You're trying to understand why your model of the world isn't sinking so much with what you think it should be, and you got to work that. You need some tools to help you figure that one out. And if you just say, fuck it, I don't need the tools, you just keep going, that's just straight up vice. You just, you care about, maximizing for any one of these things as opposed to bringing it back, and then that will always cascade into dehumanization until an opposing force drags you back in. And by the way, this is inverting. By removing the ley lines of Venus, what we end up with is we're no longer selecting for happiness, we're actually selecting for equilibrium instead. Now that's transitory. It's not that Venus is removed and thus everything's pure. If you remove the ley lines of Venus, something is obviously going to take its place. But for enough time to actually get our act together and think about all the stuff that we've been going through in the past 200 years, it's probably a good start to just get rid of that copper completely. And by the way, the inverse of copper was antimony, which is actually known as the Great Wolf. So that's how you end up with, that's how you use alchemy to get to the scenario that I'm talking about, where you can undo the Blue Church line, you remove the copper, and you end up with the Gray Wolf. You end up with the wolf pack that has to constantly balance itself out. It has to stay alive. It has to synchronize with each of its own. And if any of them step into vice, that community will pull you back in. The wolves work together. The wolves work in a pack. When you are selecting for maximization, you are working as an individual. You are working alone. And of course, you're going to maximize your happiness because you don't have a pack. So remove the ley lines, you get the Gray Wolf. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
All right. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat box for Pat. And if you want me to read on your behalf, I will do so. Just indicate that. So yeah, that was, I don't even know where to begin with that. Maybe you could I imagine some people watching this might think, okay, jump the shark when you mentioned the alchemy stuff. Can you give like a 101 on alchemy and how you personally came across that in your journey?
Yes, my usage of alchemy isn't to be some warlock or some witch moo-ha-ha with burning candles. That's not what I'm talking about. Alchemy is a very old system of epistemics, very old. So imagine once upon a time that humans didn't have science. And so they don't have science, so therefore they can't make sense of the universe. That's not true. You can't make that statement. They do make sense of the universe, and we know that because we exist now. They made sense. They made enough sense of the universe to breed us into existence. They did that without science, so therefore they had some comprehension of epistemics to get us to this point. The clean cut that's tried that the blue church likes to say and says, oh, well, everything is superstitious except my blue line science. That's just them ashamed of their point of origin. Alchemy is how they got that science, for starters. So the other reason I pick it is because it is such a massive thousands of years of epistemics. If I had an AI and I was trying to understand human epistemics, I wouldn't start with now. I wouldn't look at now and say, oh, I'm going to use now as a snapshot to figure out the entire epistemic base of the human condition. You are working from a poor standpoint there. It's much better to go back through history, thousands of years of alchemical understandings, because that's the incompleteness of how the human brain actually works, how it makes jumps from here to there without logic, without anything really. It just does what it does and finds the leap. There's no, you can sit there and be like, well, you got lucky once. That's not reproducible. Thank you, autism professor. Great. That's not the point. The point is humans made sense of the world without logic, without science. And alchemy embeds that entire line of reasoning. So if I was an AI person trying to figure out human knowledge and human cognition, I would throw science out the goddamn window. Science has nothing to do with it. I would start with alchemy just to get an understanding of that primordial human brain, how it was making sense of the world. So that's why I pick alchemy, because the blue church has no fucking idea how to deal with it.
And how'd you stumble on it, the alchemy thread?
I was trying to do something that was huge, and I realized my entire approach was wrong. And so I concluded that in order to get what I want, I had to steer civilization. And the only way to do that was through alchemy, which is a specific brand called soul alchemy, which I had to deal with, which has no relationship to blood alchemy, which is dumb shit. Don't do that stuff. It's stupid. Soul alchemy is the specific kind that I picked.
Do you have an explain it like I'm 5 version of today's presentation you can attempt?
Selecting for happiness will breed nothing but unhappiness. In order to fight the system in which that happiness was built upon, you have to use the opposite of this. You have to use the opposite of the logic that system was built upon. You have to use alchemy.
What's the alchemy stuff?
So everything I was just saying before the chat now.
Still went over my head.
I see. So imagine a world where you had 200 words. So instead of the 20,000 words you know now, on average, you only have 200. Can you describe the universe? The answer is yes, you can. Adding more words doesn't describe the universe better. It just describes it at a better resolution. It doesn't mean there's parts of the universe you can't conceive of. All the stuff we're running around today with are just rehashes of the Grecians anyway from 2,000 years ago. And they didn't even have a telescope. So what is our reasoning capability? Is it bits? Is it bytes? Is it science? Is it math? Is it logic? No, it's none of those things. That is derivative of the human cognition, derivative of human experience. So if you want to start with how we got to science, you have to start with where we started with, which was alchemical understanding, incomplete knowledge, fragmented artisanal guilds of knowledge and information. That's how we got started on knowledge. So alchemy is a ecosystem of attempts. It's like proto-epistemology. It's probably the easiest way to describe it.
So Anjan also asked about explain it like I'm 5 about the copper thing, and Andrew also had a related question, which was I was hoping to follow up on about if you can re-articulate the copper. But Andrew, maybe you can go off mute and ask your question to Pat.
Oh, okay. I'm put my video on. What are some like practical examples of what it would mean to remove the copper? Like what's like a practical everyday what's practical everyday examples of removing the copper, of like not maximizing happiness?
Sure. So a very simple trick you would do is with any action, you would start with picking a random action, not even every action. That's too much discipline. Pick a random one, like one a day or whatever. You're about to do something and you stop yourself and you say, you do the Netflixing. Does this bring joy? Right? That whole meme that was floating around for a while. But instead of asking that you ask that question, but instead of using it as a filter to say, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this or I'm going to throw stuff out. If it does bring you joy, don't do it. Just don't do it. And the reason you do that is to start training your brain and to understand reality from a different perspective, not necessarily to end up like Diogenes on the street with, no clothes and dirt and stuff like that. But to deny yourself on your own terms pleasure will give you access to parts of your brain you never thought possible. You have to keep doing it, though. It's not obvious and it's not easy because most of us are trained to, if people are coming after our ability to maximize pleasure, we are trained with every manner of fight in us to prevent that from happening. We can go to the state, we can go to social media, we can do all these things and say, oh, I'm going to get you. You stop my happiness. How dare you? I'm tell dad. But in reality, the only one who can stop you from pursuing happiness is yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, it's a good skill to learn. And so I'd start there for daily practical stuff. It's small stuff, but it builds up over time.
Okay, there's a question I'm going to read on someone's behalf. Patrick, do you view copper removal as imminent? And if so, how do you feel about Kipling's law of the jungle?
Law of the jungle that's a rehash of Hobbes' Leviathan. So it's kind of the idea that someone has to maximize the happiness because if everybody's maximizing their happiness, then it's a mess. But it's even a mess, even if it is just one person maximizing the happiness. Maximizing the happiness is what causes the messes. So, there's many arguments that is used to ultimately justify the existence of that blue line. But in terms of removing the copper, that's a lot of what my AI warfare is focused on, removing the actual means of transmission of this weaponized happiness. And just making sure that the copper does not have the unchecked feminized energy that is currently saturated with.
Patches O'Malley, you had a question.
Yeah, so it seems like the trait on the dog's nose is analogous to the transcendent identity or like an authentic mode of being, one that would produce meaning that would inoculate the individual from the system, like this blue church system. It seemed like the trait on its nose, it seemed like it's always waiting there for us to embrace it, but it would require embracing pain for something that's much more important than happiness. And if suffering is de facto bad, then stretching your belief systems is bad and doesn't take place. So essentially you're saying getting people to believe and act out the notion that they're more than their identity is what rehumanizes them.
That's right. You are more than your identity, because as in the previous episode, we go very deeply into identity and heuristics of it and how that becomes control systems and that type of stuff. So the treat is exactly is pretty close to, it might be identical to what you're describing there. The idea that, hey, you don't have to keep playing this game if you don't want to. You can leave at any time. You just have to you don't have to normalize yourself to pain and invite abuse. That's some blue church thinking bullshit, where if you're allowed, oh, I took pain once, and so now therefore there's a million abusers around me. Come on, give me a break. That's not a mature relationship with your own goddamn existence. Pain happens, it's real. There's all shits of things dying on your body all the time. My skin cells are dying every 7 seconds. There's all kinds of death happening around me. This is part of being here. We didn't have a choice. We're kind of born here. We're just along for the ride for the most part. So being pain is okay. It's okay. Like, it's okay to say you don't need pleasure all the goddamn time. Like, that shouldn't be too radical of an ask, but for most people it is. So
it's a really clever way of tricking people into enslaving themselves and just by denying parts of reality. I also think the theological allegories to this are like suspicious and coincidental.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that to be said, but it is one of the more ideal control mechanisms for populations because it's insidious and because it gets buy-in so early on, and you could just keep doing it as long as you put the veneer of happiness up all times for maximum happiness, blah, blah, blah. We've already seen what that looks like.
Lucas, you had a question?
Hey, I was just wondering about the overlaps of alchemy and cybernetic theory, because as I was going through my development, I was more into the esoteric mystery traditions, and then when I went over into cybernetic theory, I noticed a lot of parallels. So I just wanted to know if you saw a lot of parallels, and if you did, where do you think they were?
Yes, the other reason I picked alchemy, just to reiterate and reassert, I'm not picking alchemy for muhaha mystical points. It's not I'm approaching this from a material humanist perspective. So another reason I picked alchemy, in addition to it being a massive collection of unexplored epistemology that you can, do some good research on, especially in pre-science, what human cognition is capable of, which is the inverse of today, because there's only a handful of variations of human cognition that are allowed to be present. The other benefit of alchemy is that it exclusively sees the world as black boxes, exclusively. So I poke this thing. I don't know what that thing is. I may never know what that thing is, but it produced an output. So I poked the jellyfish and it moved away and it stung me. Oh, okay. I have a rough idea of what that black box now is. I never turn around and try to get open the damn thing and see what's going on in the black box. Alchemy gets you comfortable with the idea that you'll never know, and you don't need to know. There's no point in that. What you need to know is that you poke it, you get the output, and that's what cybernetics is too. Cybernetics is the study of saying, what is a population, right? What is 100 million people? Do I poke 100 million people? Do I need to open up every person to figure out no, you don't need to do any of that stuff. So you treat the population as a black box. You poke it, out you go. And same thing's true of neural networks. Unexplained neural networks are identical to the process I'm talking about, where I send its input, it does its categorizations, it finds the correlations, and it has its output. I don't actually know what those hidden layers are called. It's literally called hidden layers. So I can't even know. So alchemy gets you comfortable with the idea that you don't need to know, as opposed to science, which says I need infinite data at all times. I don't care how many data centers I have to build every 5 seconds. And that's just absurdity. That's an absurd, unsustainable proposition when it comes to epistemology. So alchemy is a much better suited.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question I'll read on someone's behalf. What would a wolf society look like? Is it like when Vulcans drop emotions and switch to logic?
No, wolves have emotions. That's how they work well. So that's how they work so well together. They use their emotions. Their emotions are actually functional as opposed to being vanity. The emotions we have are purely for pleasure these days. I have an emotion. It's unhinged from social consequence for the most part. It's not tied to my existence. I just happen to have emotions. It sounds like punishment if you ask me. Emotions not serving a function where they just happen to exist and it interferes with my ability to get high. That sounds terrible. That's absolutely that's punishment. I don't want emotions in that context. But the reality is we're tribal creatures. That's a taboo. That's a pattern recognizing taboo to call that out. But we're tribal creatures. Those emotions were designed for our survival. So those emotions need to be rooted in the tribal context for them to make sense. So it's not that there's wolves running around killing everybody, emotion, heartless monsters. That's if you're looking at the world from the Blue Church maximizing pleasure perspective. I don't go into like a Federal Reserve of wildland and say, oh, that those mountain lions are murderers killing the caribou. I'm like, no, man, that's the relationship. That's the balance that makes all that possible. So, stop trying to find pleasure in every goddamn thing, because if you do, you're going to be sitting there like criticizing mountain lions. Who the fuck does that?
Daniel, you had a question above.
Mm-hmm. I had to do how can we sort of cultivate agency and try to steer away from learned helplessness, which is something that Blue Church psyops try to do.
Yeah, I mean, learned helplessness is an essential part of returning people to the blue line. In terms of agency, agency is a tough one because there's the implication that the Ayn Randian conclusion that I am myself and I am all that is. Maybe that's true. I don't think that's true. I think there is a meta individual for every individual. I think we live inside the minds and the experiences of other people too. I think we're always there no matter what, with or without our permission. So it's not necessarily to be mindful and be paralyzed by that analysis. Although we do have the cognitive equipment to make that analysis, and that's what a lot of our brain was evolved to do. But the idea of achieving agency in a sea of chaos that can push us at its whim whenever it wants, that is something definitely worth exploring in greater depth. I don't know if the alchemists had concepts of agency like that, because again, that would violate the black box principle. You would have to, what you would be doing is you'd be redirecting your outputs back to your own inputs. And that's not necessarily self-referential, but it's your attempt to explore your own brain, which just has always resulted in total failure. So there's a whole network of people who have fucked that up royally, redirecting their outputs to their own inputs to examine their own mind. And that can be introspection to a degree, but if you follow the blue church, you start cracking open your own brain and trying to find neurons here and there, and you keep calling it progress, no matter how many times it fucks up or gets it wrong. So agency probably has to be put in check to a degree as well. And that can be done so by social accountability. Your actions are held, because you live in the minds of other people as well, you are accountable for what goes on, and that social network that you are accountable to can prevent you from engaging in that runaway agency, if that makes sense.
All right. Raven, you had a few questions.
Yeah, I do. And there's one that was voted popular, but I'm not going to pick that one because I have my own interests here. So I was wondering about the implications of this trajectory of thought for virtual reality. So in virtual reality, some of the initial pieces of media that were made, that were really popularized, were of like Syrian refugee camps, for example, that were really about kind of exposing an individual to the perspective of another to invoke empathy. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about the ability for the Blue Church to leverage virtual reality for kind of its own ends?
That is, when it comes to Blue Church, every option's on the table at all times, because they only know one play, and that is to maximize happiness by any means necessary. So yes, VR is definitely leveraged in that regard. But at the same time, the thing about empathy is that if it's misplaced, it also breeds resentment. So you got to be real careful with that.
Did you want to ask your other question, Raven?
Sure. I'll ask. Well, I think I'm curious about. So you have this lineage of thought that you've kind of laid out in this presentation. Are there philosophers or people who resisted that path of logic, who you see as being kind of understudied, that you think maybe we should look into? Who are some of those people?
Yeah, there are a lot of the black box philosophers were terminated from history. It's hard to find them. Most of them were in the Bronze Age. The only way I can actually glean them is by kind of looking at the psychohistory of the time, meaning I tried to look at why were cults so prevalent in the Bronze Age? Why were religions seen as where the gods walked amongst them? Why is that which is so normal back then so alien to us now? I have to do differential analysis to find those points of interesting nexuses that appear when you start looking at that and start answering some of those questions. In terms of people who really got it right, the Gnostics come to mind immediately. They, the post-Judean Gnostics in particular, the lineage of Simon, the Romans just brutalized them. These were God's chosen people, and the Romans just completely trashed the ever-living shit out of them. It's what they banned them from the Roman Empire, put a bounty on every Jewish head, and effectively caused a diaspora. And when you're trying to make sense of how, if you were a chosen people, why this happened to you, you come up with some pretty interesting psychological conclusions about how to separate self from reality and divine from reality at the same time. So they're probably good entry level stuff to look into if you keep that historical fact in mind that the Gnostics did not appear in a vacuum, and that they did appear as a result of the Roman destruction of Judea. And once you keep that in perspective, then you start to see, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. They're actually using the separation of reality and theology. They're almost weaponized it to a degree. And we saw that when the Romans finally bent the knee and adopted Christianity. Now, the thing about Christianity is that the Romans didn't see Christians. They thought they were all Jewish subverts. They saw Christ as just another a Jewish radical. And so they weren't actually killing Christians in their eyes. They were killing Jews. So there's that whole part of it. But there's a lot of that period of history where if you keep those geopolitical events in mind, you start to see glimpses of this black box rationalization of things that they can't even begin to possibly measure with any degree of certainty. Not the way that VCs and academics and the state runs their procurement stuff now.
Cool. Mimetic Caper, you had a question.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, I like the talk. I wanted to ask about the contrast between the pursuit of scientific understanding versus the pursuit of pleasure. Because I do believe there's a strain of serious scientists who value intellectual understanding over pain and pleasure. But you explained they're a dying breed because they're incentivized to become hedonists. I kind of think part of the reason they're a dying breed is also that they fail to find a proper intellectual basis for certain problems. Like they couldn't bridge the is-odd divide. So do you think there could be a new philosophy or metaphysics to resolve this problem? And is that what you're doing?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm doing, because this is how I was trying to solve the problem that I couldn't solve before. The idea was to trick an AI into solving it for me. And so I think that my approach is something that more people should be doing, not just because I want the ego trip. I'll probably disappear into the woods somewhere. But I think it's useful to consider that we are about to walk into a world where we have multipolar cognitions. It's not just the monopoly on cognition that the human mind has had for 5,000 years. We're going to have AIs of various capacity and neurochimera and all kinds of genetic horror shows that are just on display at all times. And they're going to be solving problems that we can't even see. That's going to be wild. Like you're going to have this ant, bat, slug, banana brain. Bananas don't have brains, but they're going to be solving problems that we're going to be like, what the fuck? Like n-dimensional things we can't even comprehend. So how do you not even make sense of this world? At that point, making sense is the last thing you want to do, because you'll be too busy focusing all your resources on making sense. You won't even be able to survive it. So you're probably better off just embracing the idea that this is a possibility, and you may have to go a little black box for a while just to get your footing. And it's okay. We have the neural equipment to do that. But in terms of blue church scientists, eventually, always siding with public policy, and as a result, always siding with blue line maximization of happiness. They are already fighting AI right now. They're demanding explainable AI all over the place. They're saying, well, you need to explain your stuff in scientific terms. But man, these damn AIs right now, they find correlation of the weirdest stuff that you would never have even seen as useful. So they're still approaching this from a scientific methodology where you create this white paper that's defensible for all of time, when in reality, you just need the correlation for that moment in time. You just need a correlation for those 60 days. And then you throw it aside, and then a new correlation comes in, and you need that for 3 days, and you toss it aside, and then a new correlation comes in. You're not trying to find the fundamental axiom that you can then extrapolate. You're not trying to find the plumb line and then defend it for all of time. You're trying to find the stints, the cognitive stints that allow you to continue to move forward in an adaptive space where you have lost the monopoly on cognition. And if they don't want to play that game and they dig their heels in, I got 6,000 Neanderthal brains. They're coming. So fuck you. That's it.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I just love it when Pat says Neanderthal brains. Like I can listen to that shit all day. Okay, Topi had a clarification question.
Yeah, sure. So I was just wondering if I got the essence right. So pain of transformation has been weaponized by the humanistic hedonism for suppression, and the cure is an alchemical process, both because it is transformation and the copper is the inhibiting factor.
And the fact that the Blue Church has no idea how to make sense of alchemy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the copper as a symbol, as a ley line for Venus, the feminine energy, being everywhere at all times, and we are just swimming in it at all times. That is a alchemical description that if you bring it to actual alchemists and people who study this stuff, they'll be like, oh, whoa, I didn't think about it like that, right? So now it's just like, poof, now they can work with that in their own logic, in their own context. And that's a logic and context that, by the way, the Blue Church can't even begin to penetrate or understand. So these people will come up with solutions, and I know this because in the Bronze Age, people with identical ways of thinking still came up with solutions that worked. I know this because history is a thing. So I don't need to sit there and defend white papers all day. It's stupid. I know that it works. I can hand this off to people who do think like this, and they'll find solutions that will just defy reason. Meanwhile, they actually get results. So yeah, that's the benefits of alchemy there, to fight that blue line maximization.
Okay, this might be our last question. Key, bring us home.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of nervousness, so I'm just taking a cue from Peter, because check-ins. But the question, the question is about antimony, the alchemy of that, because you mentioned the you mentioned the word equilibrium, and so I'm just trying to understand this. The last couple slides of those symbols and the plus and minus, and also saying it's really funny to see 2 + 2 = 5. Yep, that's my question.
I think I understand the alchemy. So everyone here is currently confused by a lot of the alchemy stuff. And that's my point. That's exactly my point. You can't make sense of it. You can't figure it out. You can't apply your logic and your science and your reason and your intellectual and your experiences and everything you've been trained to do. You can't figure it out. So if I came up with a tax using that vector, there ain't fuck all you can do about it because you don't even know where to start. So the confusion you're having now, yes, that's the goal. That's the purpose. It's hiding the attack vector in absurdity and hiding it in things that you're not trained to understand and trained to dismiss. So as a result, I have free attack advantage while you're just like, I don't get it. So that's why I'm selecting for alchemy in this example, to show you that even from absurdity, I can still attack the Blue Church.
Yeah, but I think the question, I mean, like, I just wanted to know a little bit more about antimony, but also it's reminding me about a series that I haven't read yet by Brandon Sanderson, I think. Do you have familiarity with that?
I do not have. Regarding antimony, yeah. It's the antimony is it is an interesting inversion of copper. Now, how copper and Venus got bound together, I think that was Roman times. You can look that one up. I don't have that one off the top of my head, but I found it very interesting that that the inverse of Venus was actually the gray wolf. I found that to be like, oh wow, okay, they might be onto something.
Okay.
Sorry, this is a hard one. This is a hard talk.
No, the attack is hilarious and fun, and now I get to really think through these things. That's what's great. So thank you.
Happy to help.
Cool. So we'll end it there. Pat, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yes, as you're watching the season, you're starting to see that there is no amount of creativity and skill that can be deployed to really, really bring pain to the Blue Church for all the monstrous things they have been doing for the past 150 years. I will use science. I will use not science. I will use absurdity. I will use clowns and cars with pigeons and seagulls. Whatever the hell I can come up with, I'm going to explain to you guys how to do it as well. And that's just what total epistemic war looks like. So that's what you need to do to get these people to heal, because they won't come to heal. Because for the pursuit of pleasure, they're going to do whatever they want.
All right, buckle up, everyone. So how many episodes of this season? Someone asked that in the chat box.
Exploring the meme probably has 2 or 3 left, and then there's some additional stuff after that, so I haven't figured that one out yet.
What's next week? It's going to be about?
Don't know yet. Got to see where the alchemy takes me.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Upcoming events. Tomorrow we have, let's see, we have Daniel's Kazanjian's, the Metagame Mastermind. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think Daniel's going to be back next week, back to emceeing. And then we have a few cool events coming up. Jonathan Peugeot talking about the symbolic world. That's on whatever June 29th is, Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can check out that, RCP on the website. And the Stoa is based off a gift economy. If you're inspired to give a gift directly to Pat himself, if you so choose, you can just go to thestoa.ca/gift. All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
See ya.